Still quite a few mushrooms here. I really should learn more about mushrooms because there's, definitely a food source in some of them. Something more to add to the table, whether you're in a difficult situation or not. But I don't know enough about mushrooms to be able to take advantage of that. I do know the one most important thing of all about mushrooms, and that is if you're not absolutely certain what you've got and that there's no lookalikes or something that's going to fool you, don't touch it. Just walk away, admire the colors of them or whatever, and leave them alone. Because as much as there's some good ones, they can hurt you. There's a mushroom up in this tree. You can see it sitting in there, deteriorating a little bit, but it's starting to freeze. And a squirrel has picked that off the ground and brought it up into, it's not a very high tree, it's only about shoulder high on me, and put it up there to dry and to store. We get 3 or 4 feet of snow in here at least in the wintertime, and anything that's on the ground or buried would be pretty much lost to the little guys. So they stick them up in the trees to dry, and then they can find them later. Something, nature, every organism, every bird, every animal, from the tiniest little microbes to the biggest of the mammals, has its own special place in the world. Its own niche where it totally belongs where it's supposed to be. Nature provides it with whatever instincts and allows it to grow and flourish in whatever the environment is that it's in. It allows it to adapt so that it can better able itself to stay in those environments and to cope with the minor changes that occur, except for mankind. Of every critter on the planet, we're the only ones that seem to think that we know better than nature, that we can do a better job, that we can organize and take care of the planet better than nature. Just because nature's been here for 600 million years doesn't mean that means anything. Mankind thinks that perhaps he's so brilliant and so awesome that he can take over the job and make it better. And, well, we know how that's going. What I thought I would do is show you a little bit about what I carry, just when I'm pretty sure I'm only going to be out for the day. I always carry a few supplies. So everybody talks about the perfect kit to carry with you, the perfect pack. The truth of it is these things don't exist. For each person will have different knowledge, different skill levels. There's no point in carrying something that you don't know how to use effectively. And there's no point in not carrying something just because nobody else does that's something that you're very familiar with and might find a good use for. Not only that, but climate conditions. It's extremely cold where I am up here, even in the summertime. The water is extremely cold. Hypothermia is something that you always want to keep in mind. So first, I guess always, I'll carry a fire kit. And in here, I have a little pouch. In there is some very dry birch bark and shavings and chips, and if I'm carving a spoon or something, I save the little shavings. It's kind of like a feather stick without the stick part. And then over the time, these become very, very dry. So that's a good way to get the fire going if there's kind of a shortage of dry tinder. And this is something you should always be watching for as you just walk around through the bushes. Just keep your eyes open for that. A fire steel. Now here's a Bic lighter, and it's in a little case. This case is kind of cool. It adds a little bit of weight, and it takes the smaller of the Bic lighters, but it protects it in there. You don't accidentally push the button when it's in the bag jumping around. So you're not going to end up cracking the thing or having this button depressed and lose your fluid. So this is just a real simple fire kit, and that's about all I really carry. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy. This is the little fire starters and also a little bit of Vaseline soaked cotton. If you can't get a fire started in that, then you're doomed. That's about as good as it gets. If it's raining and everything is so soaked or so underwater that you can't start your fire with this little kit, you're not probably going to have a fire that day. I carry a flashlight. A lot of times when you're out hunting, the animals are most active late in the evening or first thing in the morning. And if you get something on the ground, especially a bigger animal, you might very well shoot it just at dusk. And by the time you get it field dressed and ready to drag out, an hour could go by and it's completely dark. So it's always a good idea to carry a flashlight. Okay, this is just a fanny pack that I carry. It's plenty big enough. I also put a strap from the little finger holder on the back that goes around to the top so that it goes around my waist, but this strap cuts across over my shoulder. That helps adjust. It's not terribly heavy, but you can feel it. It's always riding on your hip if you're walking a lot, especially in uneven terrain. So you can adjust this looser or tighter just to give yourself a bit more comfort when you're doing it. Also, there's a small knife that I made which hangs this way when I'm wearing it. This knife was made from an old file, and this, I don't know if you can see, I'll bring it up closer, is the rib bones of a moose. It's all starting to yellow and look old and get that patina of age, which personally I think is very cool. But for little chores, that actually you could do a lot with that. In an emergency, even if that was the only thing you had, you could do pretty good with it. I'll put him back in there. I carry a small thermos and a cup so that I'll always have a drink, make tea, whatever the case may be. I don't always carry my little tea billy. Today I knew I was going to be on the move. I wasn't really thinking about having a fire, but this seemed like a good time to do this. As far as cover, you always want to be available with some cover. You never know when the weather's going to turn. Here it can turn pretty quickly. So this is one of those super cheap little ponchos. You get them in places like Walmart for $1.50 or whatever it is. They're not very durable, they're not very rugged, but they will keep you drier if you need it. Carry a bandana. Also makes a good cloth if you need to wash something. I also carry these great big drum liners, big giant plastic heavy duty garbage bags. There's a couple of them in here, and I mean they're huge. They're 100 and something liter bags of a very durable heavy plastic. You can put things in it. You could fill it with leaves and use it for a mattress if you wanted to. You could make a smaller portion of it and carry some water in it if you needed to carry a bit of bulk of water. I've not often, but occasionally I have slit the top of it right along the neckline and pull it over like a poncho. And it does a dandy job of keeping you dry because it's quite a bit heavier than that thin plastic. And there's 2 or 3 of them in here, and as you can see, it doesn't really weigh much, and it doesn't take up much room. So those are a handy thing to have. Well, since we're in this pouch, we'll finish it. There's a whistle. It's got one of those compasses on the end, and it actually opens up, and you can carry things in there. I don't happen to have anything in it at the moment. Yeah, I'm not going to blow it very hard. But that's always handy. I've never used it, but again, handy to have. As far as compasses go, I also don't use them very much, but this Silva compass is a very good quality compass. I've had this since I was a teenager. I am a big fan of topographical maps, and what I'll do is I'll study a map of an area if I'm not familiar with it. And so when I go into the bush, even though I don't necessarily take that map with me, I know if I'm going into the east side of the road and I get turned around, as long as I'm heading west, I'm going to come back to that road somewhere. Maybe not exactly where I left the car to go in, but at least I'm going to come out of the bush. So a compass, just to get your general direction if you're not too handy at that, is always a good thing. The knowledge of where you are is really a good thing. And something else that I've never seen anybody else carry, these are the little hand warmers. And there's 2 of them in here, one for each hand. And when you tear these open and activate them, they will generate quite a lot of heat for 8 to 10 hours. Now, that's pretty handy because even though it's obviously not wintertime enough to wear gloves and worry about hand warmers, if you fell in the water And like I said, that water is freezing cold, and it's very cold even in the summer. Hypothermia is right there, and if you got to get a fire going, you really got to get yourself warmed up pretty quick. You could open up a couple of these, tuck them in under your arms or maybe around your neck where the arteries are going, and they'll generate enough heat, especially if you get kind of tucked in and get some dry blanket around you. They can generate enough heat just to keep that core temperature a little warmer than it would have been in an emergency, because if you're soaking wet and you drag yourself out of the river, you can't always get a fire going. Your hands might be numb. You can warm your hands up enough so that you can use your fire steel or whatever. These things can be a real lifesaver, and they're like $1 for this little 2-pack, or $1 whatever. And I never go anywhere without these things. These are just a real safety feature. I've got a small sharpening stone in here. I don't generally carry a sharpening stone in this. Generally speaking, if I'm out for the day, I start off with my knives in good order. I've usually got more than one knife with me, and it would be most unlikely that I'm going to need to stop and sharpen a knife during a day trip. And even if I'm stuck out overnight unexpectedly and I have to deal with that, a decent quality knife should hold an edge long enough to help you get together a little bit of a shelter or something, get a fire going, and get you ready to get out of there. You really don't, in my opinion, need to carry a lot of that it's extra weight, and you really shouldn't have to carry it. I'll just leave this stuff here for the moment. So going back to the main pack again, and here's something else. I travel a lot by river or along waterways, and this is something else that I've never seen anybody carry. And this is a handy little item if you are stuck out there somewhere. This is a little fork. You can see it mounts. You just carve a stick out of the woods and taper it enough so that you can stick it on here, and you've got a little fork. Now, something like this little gaff or whatever you want to call it, would be a real good thing to have. If you're along the edge of water, you could get small fish with fairly large fish with this when it comes down to it, if you see them. Frogs, small animals, all kinds of things could be acquired by this in the off chance that you're going to be out there for several days. It's not the kind of thing that I would normally say you should have to have one, but why not? Again, it's not very heavy. It's quite rugged. This particular is a very old one, and with the simplest addition of a stick on there, you've got yourself even a small defensive item, I suppose, if you really were in desperate. But for the most part, it's a real good way of acquiring some small game and small animals and fish and whatever. In here, I keep some cordage. Now this is the decoy line that I talk about. It's very thin and very fine. It's very strong, and it doesn't take up much space. There's probably 25 or 30 feet here, I can't remember exactly, in this tiny little bit. So as far as tying off a little tarp or something for shelters or whatever you need to do in an emergency, you could use it for fishing line, all kinds of things that you can use it for. And you've got a fair bit of it there in such a tiny little bit. And then the rest of this is a small fishing kit, which basically has a steel leader in here, which doesn't want to come out, just a steel leader. There's several hooks in here, a few weights, small weights, and so on. Really, that's about it. I should probably put a couple of flies in there of the fly fishing type, and maybe a lure or two, but that's it for now. Another thing I carry, typical with most people I believe, is a few snacks, mostly sugar, candy, chocolate bars. These are actually granola bars. But even though you're not going to starve to death in a short period of time, if you're stuck out somewhere and the situation is not what you were expecting, it's comforting. If you're stuck out somewhere, even if it's just for one night, if you can get a fire going, get a tarp or one of these bags or something to cover you over so that you're not getting wet or being chilled badly by the wind, even if you've got something like this to munch on, that can be a comforting thing, and that's a big morale booster in a difficult situation. First aid kit, this is super simple. A couple of antiseptic wipes, some alcohol wipes, some gauze, band-aids, nothing I just took some Gorilla Tape and wrapped it around here. Again, it's very light. I could probably have wrapped it on something flat and made it a little thinner, but whatever. But it's I think there's 20 feet of it here. And again, you know, in an emergency, if you've got to patch something up or patch a hole in your tarp or whatever it is, you never know. It just doesn't take any effort to have it. And then I keep a little, now I'm often hunting or fishing or whatever, so I keep a really small, this is a kit that I've made up, well, probably 6 or 7 years ago. It's made out of a bit of deer hide that I tanned a long time ago. Just a little bit of a sort of a fix-all kit. Pair of fingernail pliers, they're cutters. They're kind of handy because they do have the little file on there and the hook, so if you've got something stuck in your finger, a sliver or whatever, you can often pick it out, or even sometimes catch it with, with this. And if you don't pinch them too hard, you can often pull a sliver out without actually cutting it off. Again, they're handy to have and they don't take up much space. This is a very inexpensive multi-tool, but it's got enough strength to it to do any small jobs, and a little pair of scissors, a knife that I keep very sharp like all my knives. On this side again there's a pretty good file, be used for sharpening fish hooks or whatever, a small straight blade for a screwdriver, and there's a little pair of tweezers in here that my fat fingers can't get out right at the moment, and I'm not going to bother. Oh, wait a minute, oh, there we go. Okay, there's a little hook there. A little pair of tweezers, and again, if you get into trouble with a sliver or something like that, you can quickly deal with it without too much trouble. Keep a little S-hook in there if you're tying something off or you want to hang something down by the fire. It's always handy. Keep that handy. A little bit of brass wire. They call this snare wire, which it could be used for, but there's 20 feet here, I think. 20 gauge, 20 feet. So there's enough wire there that, again, you can use it for tying off something if you're making a shelter. It's very strong, and certainly you could use it for snares, I suppose, if you needed to. But if you're only out for a night or two, you're not really wanting to waste a lot of time and calories running around setting snares when you're not likely going to be there that long. There's a little bit of leather cordage here, and a small sewing kit. This kit has a couple of buttons, a safety pin, a little bit of thread, and a needle. It's not much. I can't really say that I could really find a desperate use for it in an overnighter situation, but whatever. And these are typical zip ties. Normally the ones I've had in the past were shorter and fit in my bag, but these, as you can see, are a little bit too long. So I've just dropped them in the bottom of the overall bag here, but I should get some of the smaller ones. And the only thing I don't have in here at the moment, which I normally do, is a mirror. And I took that out for another purpose, and don't do what I do because I didn't put it back in. So that's probably not a good thing, because the longer it's not in there, the longer you don't think about it, the less likely you're going to ever put it back. And then if and when the day ever occurred that you did need it, you know where it's going to be, somewhere at home where it's of absolutely no use to you. Anyways, that's just a real simple version of some of the stuff that I carry. It's enough without being super bulky. Oh, there's an elastic too. That was on my little bag. It's enough without being too bulky to get you through the day. You can boil water in this thing. Not the best thing to boil it in, but you could do it if you're in a pinch. There's enough water in here to keep you hydrated for an overnighter. You might be a little bit thirsty before the day's over, but it's not going to cause you any harm. And this is going to get you through the day. You can carry this anywhere without having it too bulky. And if it's too bulky and too heavy, you're more likely to say, well, I'm not going to need that. I'll leave it at home this time. You don't want the inconvenience of it. To carry a big pack, you don't want the hassle of the weight of it, or the fact that it's strung on your back, or whatever the reason is. So, keep it simple, keep it light, have enough stuff in it. I could probably thin this down a little bit too, but have enough stuff in it that, if in a pinch, you can sort of MacGyver your way into whatever you need to do to get through we're not talking about being out for a week or something here. We're talking about, you know, an overnight or maybe a second night, you know, in a pinch, which certainly can happen here because, you know, you head up the river here, you can easily go 20, 30 miles up these rivers and there's nothing. Absolutely, there's not a road, there's not a pathway, there's not a snowmobile trail, not a cabin, absolutely nothing. So if you get 20 miles up the river and something as simple as your outboard fails, guess what? You're there. And you know, an emergency situation or a tough situation doesn't have to be something dramatic. It can be something as simple as your engine won't start. You're just up there for an afternoon of fishing and boom, there you are. So I hope that this was of some value to you. If there was anything here that you thought was good, I would appreciate it if you'd share it with anybody else that might be interested. If you haven't subscribed, it would be great if you did, and hit the little bell so that you get notified when the next videos come out. And in the meantime, it's been great having the time with you, and I look forward to doing it again in a few more days or a week. So have a great day, have a great week, and we'll see you the next time.